Because of her unpretentious approach to gourmet food, Nigella Lawson has been called a New Age Julia Child. Her best-selling cookbooks include How to Eat, How to Be a Domestic Goddess, Nigella Bites, and Nigella Express, and she can also be seen on a number of syndicated cooking shows. Ms. Lawson's latest cookbook, Nigella Christmas, is filled with her takes on seasonal dishes like roast goose with pear and cranberry stuffing and Christmas spiced chocolate cake. It's published by Hyperion, and I'm very pleased that it has brought Nigella Lawson back to our show. Hi.
Hello, I'm always pleased to be here.
You and your husband are Jewish. What inspired you to write a cookbook specifically for Christmas?
Well, I was brought up with Christmas, and I think that it's a slightly different... There are different connotations to the word Christmas in Britain, and for us it's the holidays. And, I'm not observant. Obviously, otherwise that would be a rather strange thing to have done. But Christmas, I suppose, is the kind of pinnacle of family time and being together. And Christmas loomed very large in my childhood. It was... Perhaps a friend of mine who's also Jewish said that the sort of most obvious way her father showed his Jewishness, which is that you had to be there for Christmas every year. So I think it's perhaps wrong of me to say it's a secular festival, but it's in England. But it certainly is pretty well universally celebrated. And I think that for me, what interested me an awful lot is how much it really is. A sort of legacy of the pagan era, and by that I mean historically rather than in terms of heathen.
So you're not having the same sort of thing happen in England that's happened here, where we are seeing a kind of emerging, at least in some parts of the secular Jewish community, of Hanukkah and Christmas.
Well, I know, I have heard of that, and there was, I think, an episode of, was it Friends or something, when they had a Christmas tree, but
or Hanukkah bush.
Yes, quite. But in a way, it's in Britain. I think it's not really. The Jewish community is probably quite separate. There is in Park Lane every year. Is it a menorah? I don't even know what they're called. A huge menorah that's lit up, but I think that mostly all the streets have Christmas trees and so forth.
You say that Christmas is about ritual and tradition. What are your usual holiday customs?
Well, my Christmas customs really start late. They start after the 15th. It's always after the 15th of December. And I make sort of some cookies to hang from the Christmas tree. And I started when my children were small. And it was actually quite a deliberate attempt to begin a family ritual of my own, because in a way, I suppose the novelty of having a family hadn't worn off, and I enjoyed doing that mostly because I'm not very good at anything that requires a lot of activity. Therefore, cooking was good, and they enjoyed doing it as well. It involved a lot of sugar, and I've carried on doing that. And as they now a teenage, it's a relatively small thing to ask them to do. I think they don't want to have too much to do in that sort of thing. But I think that is nice, and I do feel that a Christmas tree can be beautiful. I think there's something... I do still think, as I said in my book, there is a huge pagan heritage, and by that I mean particularly if you live in a small dark island, as I do, that the sense of bringing light into the darkness is enormously important, and so all the twinkling lights or the candles give one a sense, I suppose, of warmth and coziness in what otherwise would be a rather long, bleak period.
You said you start on the 15th of December. When I lived in London many years ago, only the most committed cooks made Christmas pudding because you have to start it a year in advance. Usually they start the day after Christmas. Are people still willing to think that long term nowadays?
Well, there are many people who do make their Christmas pudding a year in advance. I don't, and it isn't really necessary.
Why does it take that long?
I think it doesn't really take that long. I think it was the ritual, and I think it was steeped in so much alcohol, and they would add some, and it would get... goodness knows what it really tasted like after it had been stored for a year. But I find... I think you do need some maturing to take place, but I'm quite happy to do mine 3 weeks or a month ahead. I think in the old days, it was the year itself probably was a lot more austere than it is now. I think, those of us who live, in the affluent West have a year which is full of, relatively speaking, feasting, so that the Christmas feast itself probably now doesn't have quite the same relevance as it used to, when really you probably were eating turnips for the month before.